any substance can be harmful, but psychedelics they're not addictive, and they have huge promise in helping people who are struggling with mental health or addiction problems. There's more and more peer-reviewed studies. There have been going back to the 60s, but that research got shut down when Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs. And we know that a lot of these substances, people suffering from PTSD or depression or heroin addiction can literally have their brains just reset and have receive so many benefits. And so our biggest champions for this bill are combat veterans.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Sacktown Talks, talking a little affordable housing and legalizing psychedelics with Senator Scott Wiener. Scott, thanks for joining us and welcome to the program again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to touch base with you again. For years we've talked with you about some of these similar topics, and you've been grinding away at housing over these past few years. Can you tell us a little bit about now that the bill signings have happened, some of the successful wins you've had in housing this year?
It was a strong year for housing. A few weeks ago, the governor was in San Francisco signing almost 40 housing bills. The biggest ones, the focus were the two now laws making it easier to convert commercial land for use as residential. We have a lot of underutilized strip malls and other commercial land that could be housing or mixed use. But right now the zoning doesn't allow it. And so AB 2011 by Assemblymember Buffy Wicks and SB 6 by Senator Ana Caballero will help with that. I also authored a bill the governor signed to streamline and expedite approval of student and faculty housing on UC, CSU, and community college campuses. We have a profound shortage of student housing, and far too many of our college students are homeless or housing unstable, and we need to fix that.
One thing I admire about you, Scott, is you have an idea and you stick with it and you keep plodding along. What is the difference from what you started with? What was it, SB 50 back in 2019 or 2018, to some of the stuff has been signed in the last few years?
It was actually SB 827 was the first big huge fight that we did, which was the predecessor to SB 50. It's been a long road. But back in my first year in 2017, I authored SB 35. That was the major housing streamlining bill that we need to remove at sunset pretty soon. But we made a lot of progress. I mean, we've done a bunch of bills to streamline and expedite the approval of housing. We've done some good zoning reform, these commercial conversion laws, but also SB 9 by the Pro Tem, SB, which allows for duplexes, SB 10, which I authored, that makes it easier for cities to rezone for small multi-unit, all the ADU work that we've done, all the density bonus work we've done to allow for higher density if you have more affordability. We completely restructured how cities plan for more housing. Much higher housing goals. RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, that's a bill that I authored. Other bills that tighten up the housing element process. So I think we've laid a lot of good groundwork that is we're starting to see results, although it's always slow in how it goes forward. And of course, the governor and the attorney general have made clear that they're going to enforce our housing laws,
right?
Which is incredibly important.
The second half of it. So when you had these ambitious goals in 2017, 2018 when you came in, what percentage have you completed of those goals today? And what do you think you still need to achieve coming here in the next session?
What percentage? There's always so much to do. I've achieved maybe a third of the way there. Still have a bunch more things to do. Maybe 40%. So definitely more to do.
Chipping away. And so some of the aspects you've taken care of, what are you still looking forward to doing, next session that you think you really need to attack to really make some groundway on housing?
Well, I mean, I mentioned SB 35. We need to remove the sunset on it. It's been a successful streamlining law. I'm also very committed to our church housing bill. I mean, attach religious institutions and nonprofit colleges, making it easier for them to build affordable housing on their excess land. We've tried it a few times. It's a very popular bill, but it keeps hitting random varying roadblocks. So hopefully we'll get it done next year.
Yeah, it was interesting. I saw an article recently saying that San Francisco has 250 million vacant square feet of office buildings. Is there a conversation going on about how to transition some of this office space to housing, or I guess what kind of the city needs to do to, I guess, reinvigorate this empty office space?
I mean, I think it's way too soon to proclaim the death of offices in San Francisco. I think there people are companies are gradually having more people back in the office. The office rents in San Francisco before the pandemic were so obscene that not only were small businesses, startups, nonprofits being pushed out, but like law firms were getting pushed out of the city. So I think with lower commercial rents, we're going to see more flexibility and more opportunities for those smaller for-profit and nonprofit enterprises to be able to find office space in San Francisco. So I think it's way too soon to pronounce the death of offices in San Francisco. With that said, flexibility is a good thing. Although for high-rise office space, converting it to housing is not easy. There's a lot of reconstruction that has to happen, which is not cheap. So it's not as straightforward as it might seem. But I think there's a lot of work being done to try to re-envision downtown. And having more people living downtown would be a good thing. So that instead of just office workers supporting these small businesses, restaurants, bars, et cetera, you have residents there as well. We need the housing. And so having more of a mixed use vibe downtown would be good.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like you grew up on the East Coast, you went to school on the East Coast. It seems like they're having a bit more of a COVID rebound in New York City. It sounds like. It seems like New York is back. The nightlife is back. Things are back. And it seems like San Francisco is kind of struggling to get its mojo back from pre-pandemic. What do you attribute that to? And kind of what do you think can help get the city back?
Yeah, I only partially agree with that because you're talking about downtown. In our neighborhoods, the neighborhoods are doing well. They have been through a lot of the pandemic. Our neighborhoods like North Beach or Castro or the Mission or any number of Hayes Valley residential neighborhoods that are where there's a lot of foot traffic, a lot of activity. If people work at home, then they're going out and they're, for lunch or whatever in their neighborhood. So I don't agree with, the national press loves pronouncing the death of San Francisco. It's written our obituary, probably 50 times. And San Francisco, whatever our challenges, and we certainly do around homelessness, but other cities have problems with homelessness too. But our neighborhoods are doing reasonably well. It's the downtown area is definitely struggling. And part of that is that we have probably a higher percentage of workers who can, more easily work from home. Our employers are also, for reasons I don't fully understand, pretty ginger about really facilitating people going back to work at least a few days a week. And I have strong opinions on this. I don't have a problem with having some flexibility. I think it is very destructive to team cohesion when people are not physically with each other on a regular basis. And having people that go in once a month or every few weeks, I don't think cuts it. And I noticed on my own team when the legislature had people come back to work physically, it makes all the difference in the world when people are physically together. And again, I'm not saying everyone has to be like before where it's 5 days a week, always. It's good to have some flexibility. I have no problem with that. But this whole notion of we can just have everyone all remote all the time and just once in a blue moon people come together, I think is destructive to team cohesion. That's my personal opinion. And that's why I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll eat crow. But that's why I think that we don't know what office is going to look like in a year from now, 2 years from now. And I suspect it's not going to look like it is today. And some of the businesses that have been mass giving up all their offices, I bet you're going to regret that.
No, definitely. Something you kind of touched upon that kind of brings back some memories is there's a lot of like negative stuff out there on San Francisco, and there always has been in comparisons to New York or even LA. Kind of, why do you think that is? Why do you think San Francisco is always kind of singled out for some of these issues that other cities don't, even though they have the same issues?
Because we're the best city on the planet, and they're all jealous of us. That's the answer.
Yeah, number one tourist destination in the world for a reason.
San Francisco is amazing. People love to visit here. Even with all of the horrible press about our street conditions, which if you read that press, you would falsely think that you can't walk 5 feet without encountering a human feces and a needle. And that is false in a large majority of the city. Despite that, we still have a lot of tourism happening here. It's not what it was before the pandemic, but it's coming back. It's amazing, not just a beautiful city physically, but the people are beautiful. The diversity here is beautiful. And it's an amazing city. And so there's a lot of jealousy. And so they attack us and try to always say that we're dying and we're falling apart. And they've been saying that for decades and decades. And yeah, we have our ups and downs, absolutely. And we have some big problems now around street conditions and homelessness and some of the mental health and the drug use and all that. We're not the only city that has that problem. I can tell you when I'm in Sacramento, I feel less safe on the streets than I do in San Francisco. I feel definitely safer in San Francisco than I do in Sacramento because we have more just street life here. And so, and LA has huge problems. Oakland has huge problems. Fresno has huge problems. Chicago has huge problems. But San Francisco always gets singled out, and that's because people are jealous of us.
Yeah, you guys just had, I guess, the big weekend, right? Fleet Week. That's kind of like one of the city's most magical weekends. It kind of really comes to life, and it's kind of like coming into the best seasons of the year there in San Francisco, fall season.
Folsom Street Fair and Castro Street Fair and the Haight Street Fair and Hardly Strictly and just and I go on with all of the amazing things that are happening in San Francisco.
Yeah, and you kind of just mentioned that it's not quite back to 2019, but how was it? How well attended were these fairs and Fleet Week these past month?
Very well attended. I was around the northeastern part of the city over the weekend for the Italian Heritage Parade, which was completely packed and wonderful. And that was right around, that's like near the epicenter of Fleet Week, and there were a ton of people all over for Fleet Week. Folsom Street Fair was packed and it was just so much fun. I know Hardly Strictly did really well. A lot of people were going there, and we had the Portola Music Festival for the first time. That was very well attended. So there's just a lot happening in the city, and having some conventions coming back, which have been a real challenge. Hotel occupancy has been up. It's not what it was before. And again, I don't want to pretend like San Francisco has no problems. We have problems, but things are not all doom and gloom like national media portrays. And also, I love my fellow San Franciscans. All of us hold our city to a very high standard. And so we get really upset, myself included, when things don't go the way they should go, or when we have bad situations like we do with conditions on our streets and some of the crime that's happening. We all hold our city to a very high standard, and we're very harsh on our city because we love it so much. But with that said, there's a lot of good too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kind of one thing that you were working on originally was kind of housing, but also transportation. Transportation from home to work or other places has always been a big issue, and something that you've been working on and definitely necessary in the city. Kind of, what are some of the things you've been working on in transportation this year, and some of the wins you've gotten?
But yeah, well, we had a big win with Senate Bill 922, which is this law I authored in 2020 that was a 2-year pilot, and we just extended it for another 7 years. And it streamlines and accelerates light rail, bus rapid transit, and bike and pedestrian projects. We need, as a matter of sustainability and climate action and dealing with congestion. We need more public transportation. We need to make it easier for people to get around without having to drive. And we want to not get these projects caught up in endless CEQA. And so SB 922 exempts these sustainable projects from CEQA.
You know, it's interesting. I remember a couple of years ago learning about the subway project in San Francisco. And it seems to be like one of those projects that's been going on forever and ever. And just kind of a small example about how a good idea that's well-intentioned can take forever. Kind of what are some of the answers to entering these, getting over to these obstacles and ensure that, you can have great public transportation in a reasonable amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably true in this country generally, and definitely in California. We've forgotten how to do things efficiently in a time-efficient way. In San Francisco, we had Van Ness Bus Rapid Transit, which is a bus-only dedicated lane that goes for a big stretch of Van Ness, which is one of the spines of our city's street system. And it took like 10 years to environmentally clear it, and then another 4 or 5 years to build it. It's absurd. That should have been done everything instead of 14, 15 years. It should have taken 2 to 3 years tops. It's done now. We opened it last year. It's amazing. We take a bus up Van Ness. It is so fast. Doesn't get caught in the traffic. It's just wonderful. We need more of that. It needs to be faster. And so SB 922 will help it be dramatically faster in terms of the environmental review, because it'll be exempt. We also need project delivery reform because it's just way, way too slow.
Yeah. You've always been also very interested in kind of environmental issues and kind of revolving transportation and other stuff, kind of in focus of the environment. Kind of what have you been working on lately, and kind of what can we expect from you next session on these issues?
Well, I had, a few things this year. That public transit bill I mentioned is a climate bill. We also were able to pass SB 379, which is our mandating that cities adopt automated app-based permitting for basic solar and energy storage systems. It shouldn't take weeks or months to get a permit when you're putting solar panels or energy storage on your home. It's to the point, it's more like a dishwasher now. I bet you when they invented dishwashers, maybe you need to get a plumbing permit to put the dishwasher in. You certainly don't anymore. And we need to move towards a more efficient system. And SB 379 will be great. It'll be dramatically speed up permitting for clean energy systems on people's homes. The bill, the one that got away, but not for long, is SB 260, which is our bill to require large corporations to disclose their entire carbon footprint, including from their supply chain, so they can't greenwash. There's a lot of green marketing by companies that are anything but green. And there was, we had a tidal wave of the grand coalition of the business community fighting us on that. And they would run around telling members that, this isn't going to do anything. It's not going to be useful data. Well, if it's not going to be useful data, then why are you fighting it tooth and nail? Because they don't want to disclose this because some of them might look bad. We got it all the way through the Senate. We got to the Assembly floor, and we got stuck at 40 votes in the Assembly floor, 1 vote short, despite that tidal wave of opposition, including a lot of work by national groups like the American Bankers Association. Bankers are obsessed with not having transparency around carbon emissions. Go figure. And so we'll be back on that one. It's a righteous bill. We have a broad coalition, and we're not giving up on that one.
Yeah, what amazes me about you, Scott, is you have a lot of bills like that just come up to 41, just barely pass or just barely not pass. Kind of.
I've never had a barely not pass. Before this time, I only had one bill twice, our 4 a.m. bar bill.
Right, the 4 a.m. Yeah, was it too short?
Where we had 41 committed votes, and it ended up getting 30 or 28 because some of my colleagues whom I love dearly in the Assembly, a few of them got up and made very melodramatic remarks. But they're, I love Tom Lackey. I love Jim Cooper. I consider them friends, and I really love them as colleagues. I just have a strong disagreement on this, and I think they made some extreme remarks about this bill in terms of public safety. I just disagree with them, and that really spooked some members, and so it didn't pass. So when I go down to the assembly floor, it goes down in flames. This is the first time that I've like literally stuck at 40 votes. Oh, wow. You can't just get the one more vote. That's much more painful than going down. When you go down flames, you go down flames. Right. It wasn't meant to be. It didn't happen. You just take a deep breath and you move on. Being stuck at 40 rocks up, because there were 40 votes up there, including some members who were like not expected votes, but who kept their word and voted for it and took that vote that was opposed by so many business community stakeholders, and they stuck with it. But it was the last night of session. It was also after the assembly had voted on all the governor's climate bills, and so there were members, I'm confident, had it come up a day or two before, would have voted for it, I'm pretty sure, but they had voted on all these other bills and they just were done. Yeah. And so we got stuck. So, I'm motivated, our coalition's motivated. So we'll see what we can do next year.
Yeah, I just kind of remember at the end of session, it just seemed like you had like maybe it was only a couple, but a few bills that were like getting a lot of attention, and one of them was a vaccine bill, transgender bill, and maybe one of these shooting safe injection sites or something like that. Yeah. And I was just like, man, it was just a kind of a gauntlet you were running there. Kind of, how does it feel? And have you been able to recharge your batteries?
Yeah, we had tough ones. We got the trans state of refuge bill through, and every Dem voted for it, which is great. The safe consumption state, the legislature passed it, and I'm super grateful to my colleagues for doing that. And tragically, the governor made a huge mistake in vetoing it. I love the governor, and he's an ally and a friend, and he just really messed up by vetoing this, unfortunately. Obviously, he has a different perspective, and so he gets the final word. And then our psychedelics decriminalization bill got gutted in Assembly of Probes, unfortunately. And I'm not complaining, because Chairman Holden was very, very good to me in appropriation, so I have no complaints whatsoever. But that one got gutted, so we dropped it. But that bill has a path to being passed, and so we're going to try that again next year. I've been trying to recharge, but my recesses are normally sometimes as intense as the session. So, yeah. But I'll have a few little breaks here and there.
Yeah, you just talked about your psychedelics bill. Can you kind of explain to our listeners about the importance of legalizing psychedelics and why they shouldn't be treated like some of these other drugs?
Yeah, I believe in drug decriminalization generally. I don't think we should be locking people up or arresting people for using, drug. The war on drugs is a failure, and it's a health issue. Oregon has done it. We should do it too. But with that said, psychedelics are really, any substance can be harmful, but psychedelics they're not addictive. And they have huge promise in helping people who are struggling with mental health or addiction problems. There's more and more peer-reviewed studies. There have been going back to the 60s, but that research got shut down when Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs. And we know that a lot of these substances, people suffering from PTSD or depression or heroin addiction can literally have their brains just reset and have receive so many benefits. And so our biggest champions for this bill are combat veterans. We have a whole coalition of combat veterans who came back from war, from Iraq or Afghanistan, really struggling with mental health, and psychedelics help them turn their lives around, save their lives. So it's a righteous bill. It passed the Senate. I'm pretty sure that had we gone to the assembly floor, we would have had the votes. We had some very moderate Dems who were supporting the bill because they met with our veterans and they got it. Right. And I'm appreciative for their open minds. So we'll try again next year.
Yeah, it's always like when you bring an idea out there, they're like, wow, that's so crazy. Like, you can't do that. And especially like law enforcement, like how are you able to bridge the gap to change people's minds on this issue?
Well, I work with law enforcement, and particularly with the police chiefs, who I find to be very open to dialogue. And on psychedelics, we actually we cut a deal with the police chiefs, not that they would support the bill, but putting some limits on the bill that would cause them to de-escalate. And so we'll continue to work with the police chiefs, and we'll try to work with other law enforcement too. I don't think any of the law enforcement were going, prioritizing killing this bill, because I think they understand that whatever problems we have in society with drugs, mushrooms are not part of that problem.
Right.
No one's really complaining about like problems with mushrooms. So
right. It's fentanyl. You'd much rather have people taking mushrooms than fentanyl, right?
Yeah, and in fact, there is a particular psychedelic ibogaine. It's a plant out of Africa that I have friends whose son was addicted to heroin. Everything was failing, and they sent him down to Mexico for an ibogaine therapy program, and he doesn't use anymore. It literally fixed his brain. And so that's why when people are like, well, we have all these homeless people using drugs and they might start using psychedelics. I'm like, you know what? If a homeless person or anyone on our street decides to switch from heroin or from meth to mushrooms or ayahuasca, I'm all in favor of that, because that is probably healthier for them and healthier for society as a whole.
Oh, interesting.
But that's not what people on the street are using. They would be healthier if they were using it.
Right. This year we're having 30 some members kind of moving on and 30 new members coming in. Kind of what does that mean to you? And how is that going to change your strategy going into 2022?
Well, I have it's just a practice that it's really important for me to know and have a relationship with every single one of my colleagues in both houses, both parties. I think it's so important to have a good collegial relationship, to know your colleagues, to have sat down with them, know what their priorities are. That's why I have a large number of bills where I get Republican support, because not everything's a partisan issue. And I know Marie Waldron, former Republican floor leader in the Assembly, she floor jockeys all of my mental health treatment bills, because she and I are completely aligned on that. And it's super powerful when you have a partisanship. I have good relationships with both progressive Dems and with moderate Dems. I'm very close with Blanca Rubio. I'm very close with Tim Grayson. I was very close with Jim Cooper. And I just don't believe in stereotyping or demonizing colleagues, or saying, well, we have a bunch of disagreements here, and so we can't work together. Blanca Rubio, she and I have some real disagreements on some business regulation issues. She's very open-minded and very progressive on a lot of other issues, and always gives me a fair hearing. But there are some, people who might say, oh, Blanca Rubio is moderate, it's a lost cause. No, it's not a lost cause. You got to know all your colleagues and be respectful to them, and also be willing to help them and know what's important to them, so that and be collaborative and understand that it's a two-way street. And so when we have a whole bunch of new colleagues come in, I'm sad that some of my colleagues are leaving. Some people I really, really like, but I look forward to getting to know all of these people. Some of them I know from campaigns and otherwise. But I look forward to getting to know them and figuring out what's important to them and how we can work together.
Right. The 2 a.m. Last call has been around forever, and people think it's never going away. Is there hope in 2023 that people will be able to drink past 2 a.m., Scott?
There's always hope. There's always hope.
That's great. That's great. One more question before you go. You mentioned all the great street fairs and festivals going on in San Francisco. I happened to catch you on social media the day of the Folsom Street Fair and saw an awesome picture of you shirtless, Scott. And I was amazed at your physique. You keep it in great shape, Scott. What are you doing to keep that body in great shape and working out?
Thank you. I totally forgot to mention Outside Lands, which is another one. So between Outside Lands and Hardly Strictly and the Portola Music Festival and Folsom Street Fair and Castro Street Fair and the North Beach Festival and the Haight Street Fair and Fleet Week, San Francisco is roaring back. Thank you for that. I am part of my community, and I've been going to Folsom for since I've lived in San Francisco, so 25 years. And I love being part of the community, and that's what we do at Folsom. We take our shirts off, and I knew when I was posting that the right wing ecosystem would lose its mind, because they always lose their mind about anything I do, but I decided, I don't care. I'm just going to do this because this is who I am.
Right.
My parents were kind enough to give me decent genetics. So we don't have.
I guess when you're 6'7", you can probably eat more than the rest of us.
Probably.
Right.
And I love exercise. I love walking. I love working out. I feel so much better mentally and physically when I've been exercising. I hate being like sedentary and not doing, anything. It's just, I like moving. And so
right.
It's
part of your DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're living in the right spot for that. So
exactly.
Good job. Well, thank you, Scott. And thank you for being yourself and kind of, showing your life to us. So we appreciate it, and all the hard work you do for your constituents over here in Sacramento. And excited to see what you're up to next year.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.